Welcome back to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3. Nick Constantino here with Mike Moon, and we're going to get practical now. So Mike, look, one of the things about a wedding, and we just briefly talked about this, so one of the things that stood out to my head, a good photographer should know the little nuances, right? Big families, they're probably people you haven't seen. There's little kids there. They're going to be in bed by 8 o'clock. Shoot them early. Yep. So talk about little things, and you talked about how you're the wedding planner. Talk about things that you should really be looking for in a wedding photographer. But you know what? If you're having a big corporate event where you're bringing 20,000 people in from out of town, these things are as important. Talk about the kind of questions to ask, who to look for, and then what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about how you can be a better photographer yourself.
Okay. So I think one of the things to ask when you're hiring a wedding photographer, challenge the photographer to show you weddings that they've done in the dark, right? After sunset, or challenge them to show you pictures from a wedding where it rained all day, something where there's a challenge there and they were impressed with it, because that's not what they're going to naturally show in their gallery, right? When it comes to commercial photography, you know, I mentioned I worked for BlackBerry back then and Oracle shot for them, things like that. What they're really looking for is just to document everything, and they're really looking for 1 out of 1,000 shots. So right then you can just kind of overshoot, and the CEO is going to be super picky about that one shot that gets released, right? So it's all about kind of immediacy. Whereas a wedding is more about following along with the action. It's about capturing those intimate moments in the corners and the outskirts. It's about, as a photographer, you should be asking the photographer, like, how long do you take to do the family pics after the ceremony, before the reception? How long do you take to do that? Because the reality is, those real important pictures you want around the property with you and your new husband, the beautiful shots that you're going to really be excited about, if you spend all the time doing those family portraits after the ceremony, because it takes your photographer 30 minutes because they don't know that you should start with a big group and send people away instead of trying to round people up as they go, right? So that experience is really important, because the experience you're getting with a photographer, does he care about your mother enough to go up to her and say, hey, I'm sure you have old friends here you haven't seen before. Can I walk around with you and just take pictures of you and some of your friends? Yeah. Like, does he do that in his off time, or does he sit on the corner and eat cake, you know? So it's like, it's just certain things. I think that experience, you almost have to like accept that the work is good enough at face value. You're happy with what you see, and then you should expect to get what you get, because it is a product in the end. But beyond that, you should really worry about how much experience your photographer has, because that's going to give you the best day, that's the most carefree, where you know, where the experience itself of him or her being the natural leader of the day for you on your behalf is going to work out the best. Yeah,
there's so many things that can go wrong. That's not one, though, because you're documenting. And like you said, I think a great point was, like, yes, my Google Pixel with all the algorithms it runs takes really nice pictures on perfectly sunny days.
Exactly. Outside on perfectly sunny days.
Is not perfectly sunny.
Exactly. And guess what? Half your wedding is after dark, by the way.
It always hits the fan, and there's so much that goes into it. And I look, I think it's a great point. And, you know, talk a little bit about, like, you know, corporate events. Like, look, I'm a big company. I have 10,000 people coming in, all my clients and all my people, to this one place, to this one room. You know, I know there are photographers there, but for some reason, I don't feel like it's a mechanism that people care about when they're thinking about planning these big events. Why not?
Yeah, because once it's over, and you have nothing left but those pictures, right? So if you want to market later, if you want to market that event, if you're going to have that event,
and why spend all the money to do something if you're not going to market it?
Exactly. And especially if you're going to do it more than once, you want to show the pictures from last year. So,
all the people that didn't come are jealous, and then that made sure they come next year.
Exactly. And so for corporate, they understand that. I think when you have a big budget, you understand that we need to capture this moment. We need to get this stuff for advertising later, right? But, you know, when it comes to weddings, if you think about that, the budget, you mentioned the budget earlier, the reality is that if you had a $20,000 wedding budget, now remember, the average wedding, used to be about $50,000. I feel like it's going down. I feel like the younger generation isn't spending quite as much money on big weddings anymore. But let's see.
God bless them, man. I wanted to tell me after the craziest one you've ever seen, because, I mean, I grew up in New York and Long Island, the bar mitzvahs I went to were $250,000.
Oh yeah, ridiculous.
And I'm like, first of all, a 13-year-old's not going to remember this, dude. I promise you. Right? Yeah. Like hopefully the kid gets lucky with the girl, and you can drink some Manischewitz. Like, that's all the kids are thinking about. No one's thinking about, like, oh my God. Like, I was with one. They brought a circus into a building in New York City. They brought a freaking circus into a building. Like, they had 18 motorcycle racing arcade games. This is in 1995. Like, it was just anyway. But
that sounds like Indian weddings. They spend a lot of. They take over a whole hotel with 300 guests for 3 days. Like that, you're talking $250,000.
And they're just showing off in front of their friends. And it's so sad that that's the case. But that's why people throw birthday parties. They don't care if the kids have fun. They want to show off all the stuff they have. It's a sad world. And you know what? It brings to a good point. So I think one of the problems that has hurt photography is everything is about that moment. We don't look for long-term things. We want everything to be short. It's keeping up with the Joneses. It's Instagram. Once you're out of that feed, people almost forget about it. We're training people to forget about it. We're not running the power of the moments and the thing. So I think talk a little bit about how photography has evolved in your couple of years, and then
Yeah.
let's end with tactics and tricks that people can use to shoot better film. First of all, what kind of cameras are you using at weddings? Are you using multiple lenses, multiple cameras?
So I believe when it comes to cameras, I think most of them are good enough. If you control light, it's way more important than the quality of your lens of your camera. So the reality is, I love the Sony A7 III.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an older camera. You can get it for $1,000
Yeah.
used.
And those things will shoot video in a pinch too.
Absolutely,
Good video in a
absolutely.
pinch.
And instead of going out and spending, the $4,000 on a body is the latest greatest thing. I always
Yeah.
say to somebody, I'd rather use a $2,500
Good
lens
lens.
on a
Yeah.
$600 camera than vice versa.
Yeah,
right?
and you talk about, so is autofocus, is that stuff that bad when it does auto? What's the problem
okay, so
with
when
that?
you're talking about mirrorless versus DSLR,
Yeah.
right? Mirrorless cameras have eye tracking focus, which is really important because that takes a huge burden off the photographer. So when I first started using mirrorless systems, I couldn't believe how they
the
focus.
DSLRs are gone. I mean, I know people are still using
Yeah,
them, but we've really segued to the mirrorless now.
Yeah, I tell people it's like driving from Atlanta to DC. You can do it in a Tesla or you can do it in a dump truck. You're going to get there either way, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, are you exhausted? If you
Yeah.
shot a DSLR nowadays, you're going to be exhausted at the end of the day. Whereas like a
And a lot
mirrorless
of
is doing half
DSLRs
the work
started
for
putting
you.
the mirrorless features into them to compete. Like, this is always full circle. Everyone's trying to. And
It is.
you'd be surprised if you go online and search. There's a lot of cameras still for sale. Nikon's still making them.
And
I have
sometimes DSLRs are making a comeback. I've heard too. They're actually the used ones are more expensive than they were a couple of years ago
I believe
because
it.
people are having that nostalgia.
But that's also
right?
that that quick fire. The mirrorless will not be anywhere near as quick as a DSLR in my experience. The DSLR maybe more moderate.
It's not really a speed issue. The thing about a mirrorless, which is amazing, is you're basically seeing what you get while you're doing it, and so there's no guessing. You literally have it in front of you the entire time,
Love
and
it.
so it just makes everything easier. It literally, and it puts a lot of stuff on auto drive for you, so you don't have to deal with it. So the reality is, in order to be super creative, you have to be able to convert the muscle memory, those things that you have to do, those tasks you have to do to put your camera on the right settings. You have to be able to put those on autopilot,
Yeah.
so that you can have the freedom to play and look around and come up with new
and
ideas.
you have to be able to change them quickly because the scenes change quickly.
Exactly.
What
So
about
yeah.
film? So obviously you see like Oppenheimer, they released on the original film. They
Yeah.
did it in film, they put it out on film. There was no
Yeah.
digitization. I know in a lot of industries, the music industry, records came back because they tried to get the digitization. Do you see old school film cameras making a
It's
comeback?
always going to come and go. It's never to come back permanently, and it's always going to be a niche thing. I think that digital cameras nowadays can do very close to film. It's very hard to tell the difference. At this point, I don't see any reason to be shooting film other than for the nostalgia of the idea that you can't see what you're getting.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more effort. Now I'll tell you this. You're doing a lot more posing when you're shooting film. There's not all this like, I want authentic natural
'cause you
moments
have
with film.
only a finite number
It's
of-
expensive. There's 36 shots in a roll, and it's going to cost you $30 to get that thing developed these days.
If anyone even does it.
Trust me, you're doing posing if you're doing film, so you better like portraiture.
You know, it's funny. We bought our daughter a. It used to be the Polaroid, but now Kodak's trying to make a comeback in them. You put 50 pictures in, and it does it in real time. And I remember, Polaroids were so much fun having them in real time in the night because you were always posing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they fade and they look like crap.
Yeah,
They're not
exactly.
built because it's processing in real time.
Yep.
But you do see, if you Google like instant cameras, there's thousands of them on the internet now.
Exactly.
So little kids, that's what I want my daughter to see. Like, look, who cares about your cell phone? The physical touch of it.
The physical touch. It's really sad how many people shoot, have wedding pictures and they sit on a drive forever and they never get printed.
Oh,
And
that's
the first thing I say is take all your pictures and go get 4x6 printed of everything. so you can flip
God
through.
bless my wife. Whatever, no matter what we have, we'll do a dump, and she will go to the store, get them printed, and she has a stack this big.
Amazing,
And she likes
yeah.
scrapbooking. She likes doing that stuff, which for me, I am more I like to know it's there, and I'll look, but I don't need to be organized. I think there's more fun in the sporadicness of it. Real quick, give 3 tips to people of how they can be better photographers themselves.
Okay, if you're in bright sunlight and you don't have any kind of shade, put the sun to the back 3/4 of where you're shooting. In other words, the sun should be, if you hold your arms out in front of you at a 45-degree angle, but straight out from your body, that would be pointing at the sun. So it should be behind your subject off to the side. It should not be behind you, the photographer. That's
Okay.
number one. Number two is don't think that you're going to be able to get beautiful skin tones in indoor with the lights you have. There's nothing that will do that. So whenever you're shooting an iPhone, it doesn't really have a flash. You're not going to be able to get skin tones. That's a reason to buy a real camera and a reason to, not real camera, but you know what I mean.
I got
and
you.
a reason to learn how to use flash.
And skin tones are more important now than ever. I mean, there's so much sensitivity around this stuff in skin tones.
There
So
is.
we'll leave it at that. We don't go. All right, what's the last one?
Yeah, there is. Last one, like I already mentioned it, but don't spend a lot on your camera body. Go out, especially in the beginning, if you don't know if this is something you want to do long term, go buy a $600, $500 used camera body. Go get a 2.8 50 millimeter lens so that you can start learning the basics.
Flexible.
That's a perfect lens.
Flexible.
It's cheap.
Zoom, you can do a lot of things with it.
Well, that one doesn't zoom, but it teaches you the correlation of the exposure triangle between shutter and aperture and ISO. So just go learn with a simple, cheap lens, and that's also the cheapest lens. So for a $100 lens and a $400 body, you can learn the trade and take beautiful pictures instead of going out and spending, $5,000 on a kit that you don't use.
Well, you're spending $1,300 on a freaking phone now because they've convinced you it's a good camera. So go spend on the real thing.
Exactly.
And we will leave it at that. You've been listening to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3. Mike Moon, thank you, brother, and we'll catch you next week.